Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, March 5th. Hope everybody is having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into. The NFL was once again busy today. Some more record-setting contracts, some more big players getting cut, asking for trades, getting traded. We'll get into all of that in the first segment. Then we go heavy NBA as we do every single Wednesday. LeBron James cracks 50,000 career points, including the regular season and playoffs. He is amazing. We'll talk about if any player can catch him and what an amazing feat it is for him to get that far at this point in his career, as well as getting into our NBA power rankings like we do every single Wednesday, then continuing our series. We're finishing up the NFC North today. What are the Lions going to do this offseason? What is a perfect offseason for them? As well as starting the AL Central, turning our attention to the White Sox as baseball is right around the corner. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, March 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NFL Roundup Part 2. Yesterday was a wild day in the NFL. Today, trying to top it. It has been one of those weeks, and we'll start off with a team that was busy. The Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks were doing a lot today, especially in the wide receiver room. This is a Seattle Seahawks team that had arguably one of the strongest wide receiver rooms in all of the NFL. They had DK Metcalf, had Tyler Lockett, and of course they had JSN, who really stepped up last season and stepped up into really what was that wide receiver one role for them. And that irked a couple of their guys the wrong way, DK Metcalf especially. DK Metcalf requests a trade officially. Now, we kind of knew this was coming. This was something that was floated for a little while. They've been having discussions for the last couple weeks about this possibility, but it's official now. DK Metcalf, with 1 year left on his 3-year, $72 million contract, wants to go to a contender. He wants to go to a place that will win football games, which the Seattle Seahawks were the first team out of the playoffs last year. I don't think they were too far off if they just kept this core around and tried to build up that offensive line, but I digress here. He also wants a new contract. DK Metcalf at age 29 had a bit of a down season last year. He's someone that I think is still a top 15 receiver in the NFL, but he is someone that sometimes doesn't have his greatest games, sometimes will be a little bit of an issue on the field. He's very physical. He is an amazing talent, and there's a reason he's getting paid as much as he is, but a couple places that he could end up. Obviously, the Steelers, whenever a wide receiver hits the market, they're always there because they desperately need a steal. They desperately need a wide receiver to go opposite of George Pickens. They're also in the same vein. Whenever a wide receiver hits the market, you have questions about where they might go. The Patriots are always there. But one team that really sticks out to me for DK Metcalf, as he says, a contender, I think the Chargers are a really interesting one. You take DK Metcalf and you put him on that Los Angeles Chargers team, stays on the West Coast. It's also not in the same division, so that checks off 2 boxes for DK and 1 for the Seattle Seahawks, as they're not going to trade a talented receiver like that in their own division. It's also in the AFC, which checks off another one of those boxes. You can make the argument that the Chargers are contenders. I don't know how much better the Chargers really are than the Seahawks, but they did make the playoffs last year. They have a top 8 quarterback, top 7 quarterback in Justin Herbert on the roster. That's somewhere that I think would be really interesting and fun for DK Metcalf to go, and that's my number 1 landing spot for him. As well, more wide receiver news out of Seattle as they have moved off of Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is second place in franchise history in yards, receptions, and touchdowns, catching 61 touchdowns in his 10 years as a Seahawk. He has been on a little bit of a downslide recently. He only had 51 catches last season. He's done this thing over the last couple years where he doesn't fight for extra yards. He just goes down whenever he senses contact, which isn't necessarily the most this is not the worst thing, but it doesn't look great when the rest of your team is fighting for yards and he just dives half a yard before the first down line. Tyler Lockett is a guy that's playing for safety. I respect that. They saved $17 million by getting rid of Tyler Lockett. It's a lot of money for him. He's expected to go and sign with the Raiders. That is an interesting move. The Raiders could use Tyler Lockett there, but it all depends on the quarterback situation. Tyler Lockett, a very quarterback-friendly wide receiver. That's a good guy to bring in. Veteran in the locker room. That should be good. Some more news as we switch over to the Raiders, where he's expected to go, as they were also busy this afternoon, this morning. They went out and they signed a guard, Alex Cappa, former Buck and Bengal. The guard signed a 2-year, $11 million deal to return to the GM that drafted him in Tampa Bay, in Spytech, right? This is a guy that's, you see it every time. They always bring in the guys that they like, but he didn't have his best season last year. He only had 2 penalties in 2024, but he also allowed 8 sacks. 8 sacks per PFF. That would put him at 134th out of 135 guards that PFF tracked last season. Not very good. But I do believe that Alex Cappa can turn it around. It wasn't a great situation. He didn't have a lot of help to his left or to his right. So being in a better offensive line situation, not that the Raiders really are that much better, should do wonders for him. But the big news coming out of the Raiders, of course, is Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby, the star defensive and the star edge rusher for the Las Vegas Raiders, re-ups on a massive 3-year, $106 million deal. $106.5 million. That's $35.5 million per year, making him the most expensive non-quarterback in NFL history, passing Jamar Chase on a yearly number by $500,000. Justin Jefferson, who's making $35 million per year. Now Maxx Crosby is the guy to beat. This is something that you have to pay a premium for. We've talked about it in the past when we talked about things like Myles Garrett. There are certain positions that you just have to pay for. And edge rushers, the guys that can get to the quarterbacks, are one of them. They are the second most important position in football outside of the quarterback because they are the one that's going to make life awful for the quarterback. They're the one that's going to help decide how much work the defense has to do. The quicker your guys get there, the less work the secondary has to do, the less work the linebackers have to do, the more work that the quarterbacks and the offensive line have to do. These guys are extremely valuable. It is a lot of money. But Maxx Crosby is absolutely in that top tier. You can't have a conversation about the best pass rushers in football without bringing up Maxx Crosby's name, because he is a beast. He is someone that you have to game plan for week in and week out. He's a guy that sheds through double teams like it's nobody's business, and he's someone that absolutely deserves to get that record-setting money. There are better players than him. But in a premium position, the Raiders do a great job locking him up, $35.5 million per year. But that wasn't the only record-setting deal that took place this afternoon. Zach Baun, the all-pro linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, re-signs in Philly for 3 years, $51 million. Much like Saquon Barkley, he is now the highest paid at his position in NFL history. He reset the linebacker market after making an all-pro team for the first time in his career. He came over from the Saints, signed a 1-year deal, made an all-pro team, and then won a Super Bowl. This was a guy that the Eagles needed to re-sign. If they did not bring him back, the quarterback of their defense, the place where, honestly, they were the weakest. This is an Eagles team that was very strong just about everywhere, but if they lost Zach Baun, replacing him would have been near impossible. It's hard to replace an all-pro level guy. He goes out, gets his money. The Eagles, again, continue to find ways to pay people. Zach Baun was a must-get for them, and that was someone they needed. The Jaguars, also with wide receiver cuts, they cut Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, who signed a massive contract a couple seasons ago when he hit free agency out of Arizona to go play in Jacksonville. He's been injured, but he's been really productive when he's on the field. A lot of people are connecting Christian Kirk, who now that he's cut saves $10 million against the cap for the Jacksonville Jaguars, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that one makes a lot of sense. Christian Kirk is a guy that's not necessarily going to be a wide receiver one type. He's someone that if you can go and put into a solid system, another quarterback-friendly guy with good hands over the middle, he's not going to be a league winner, but he's also someone that can come in and be very productive for your team in those underneath to mid-route kind of concepts that the Steelers love to run. And the last big piece of news, the one that broke early this morning, the Bears are back at it. Yesterday, they traded for a guard. They traded for a guard today as well. Today, they trade for Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney, the all-pro guard from the Chiefs. Instead of a 6th-round pick, they give up a 4th-round pick. So in the span of 2 days, they've gotten 2 guards. Jonah Jackson, an all-pro, Pro Bowl level guy, and Joe Thuney, an all-pro level guy for a 4th and a 6th-round pick. That's, again, their second guard that they've traded for in as many days, and they are really starting to shore up that offensive line. When we broke down the Bears, what they needed to do this offseason, we said offensive line was step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and they have addressed that concern mightily. They still don't have a center. They have a solid right tackle. They have 3/5 of an offensive line. If they can get a guy like Will Campbell in the draft, that would be amazing. That would be their left tackle spot straight up. Then they still have a lot of money to spend in free agency, and you go get the best center available, whether that's Austin Corbett, whether that's the center coming from Indy, right? There are a lot of centers out there that would do wonders for this team. And right now, building 3/5 of an offensive line like that is going to do wonders for this team, wonders for Caleb Williams, who was sacked the 3rd most in NFL history. This is a great start to this new era and this new regime for the Chicago Bears. And if they keep building this lineup, if everything hits, this is a team that I could see making the playoff run next season. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of any of these moves? Did you think Maxx Crosby was worth all of that money? It's a lot of money to give out. Did you think some of these guys would get cut? Do you think Zach Baun is worth that much money? And what about the trades for the Chicago Bears? What do you think that does for that team? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we switch on over to basketball. One of the biggest stories in the world today is LeBron James, the king, the GOAT. LeBron James breaks 50,000 points when you combine his playoffs and regular seasons, the only NBA player to ever do that. We'll talk about that, what it means for him, what it means for anybody trying to catch him, and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over The big news coming out of the NFL: Maxx Crosby, the DK Metcalf trade, Zach Baun being re-signed, Joe Tooney being traded to the Bears, and much more. In this segment, we turn our attention over to LeBron James, the man that has scored 50,000 points, the only man in NBA history that can claim that accomplishment. We'll talk about what that means and if anybody can ever catch him in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, March 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into LeBron James. LeBron James continues to break records, continue to push his own records higher. He already broke the scoring record in the NBA, but now he becomes the first player in NBA history to hit 50,000 points. To put this into a little bit of perspective, if you were trying to hit 50,000 points in the NBA, you would either have to score 10 points a game for 50 seasons, basically, or you would have to score 20 points a game or 25 points a game for 20 seasons, which is basically what LeBron James has done. LeBron James has scored 27 points per game on the dot, 27.0 over his career. LeBron James has passed that 50K mark in his 21st year in the NBA. It is insane how good he is at his age. And we can continue to talk about all of these things, right? We can continue to say how amazing it is that he is as good as he is, but the real question is, every time he breaks a record, can anybody catch him, right? That's the question whenever the scoring title was broke. Can anybody do it? That's the question now. Can anybody else hit 50K? And I'm never going to sit here and say a record is unbreakable. We've seen multiple records that were thought to be unbreakable fall, including the scoring record that LeBron James himself broke. Wayne Gretzky's unbreakable record is about to be broken by Alex Ovechkin, right? There are records that we thought to be unbreakable. There's no such thing as an unbreakable record. As people continue to get better, science continues to develop, and as the sports continues to get figured out, right? As some people like to say, the NBA is a solved game. But there's no such thing as solving it completely. There's always going to be new tactics, new strategies, players that are just better at making these things, making it more efficient. So that's just going to happen. It's the natural progression of games. You're going to find a way to be better and better at it as time goes on, which is why you always see, why we always talk about different eras. You can't compare it. People just figure out better ways and are more equipped, more naturally born, freakish, train their whole life to do it. Just be better at it, right? But what LeBron James has done is hard to just look at and say, oh, it's nothing, right? No one is doing that. But for him to hit 50,000 points is ridiculous. Obviously, it's including his playoff games. But if we take out his non-playoff games, he's still at 41,000 points. He scores about 2,000 points a year. It's not out of the question for him to hit 50,000 regular season points. Now, that does assume that he plays for another 4 years or so, which I just don't really, which is, you know what? It is a real possibility with the level that he's playing at. I don't think he will. I think he'll say he's done before then. But if he played until the wheels fell off, until he could barely be a bench piece, until he couldn't shoulder the load of playing 10 minutes a game, this is a guy that I think could get to 50,000 points in just the regular season. But what he's done is incredible, and there's no other way to put it. LeBron James is a special athlete that we are not going to see, at likes of him, we're not going to see for a very long time. But again, this begs the question, who could even possibly do it? And there's only one guy that comes to mind, and that is his teammate, Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic has helped unlock probably another year or two of LeBron James since now that they are on the same team. Since Luka Doncic came over, LeBron James has been able to take less on offense, which lets him do more on defense, allowing him to pop off. He scored 34 points last night, 4 points more than Luka did. He's not passing the ball as much because he doesn't have the ball in his hands as much, but he's still a creative passer, and he's still a guy that can get it all done. Luka, on the other hand, at just 25 years old, has probably the best case in the NBA to do anything similar to what LeBron is doing when it comes to scoring numbers. He averages 1.4 more points per game over his career than LeBron has. Of course, LeBron has played for about 15 more seasons, but still, what Luka's done in a short stretch of 6 or 7 seasons so far is incredibly impressive. 28.4 points per game. If he's able to keep this up, and that's the big question. That's why this record is so hard to break, because you can go through these spurts like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going through right now, a top 10 3-year scoring spurt, but you have to be able to compete. You have to continue. You have to be able to continue to keep that level of play going for 20 years. You have to average 25 points a game for 82 games a year, 83 games a year for 20 years to get this done. That is how impressive it is. That is how crazy it is to get this done. LeBron James, one of the best athletes that we have ever seen, and one of the best athletes that we will ever see. He's just the best basketball player, right? You can talk about maybe Jordan was a better pure scorer, or maybe there were players that were better pure shooters, or players that were better pure defenders. But as the game of basketball goes, LeBron James is the best all-around player in NBA history. Right? It's incredible to see what he's done, and 50,000 points is just another momentum, another little trophy to stack on his ever-increasing trophy list, his ever-increasing records list. His basketball reference page is really long if you go and scroll down it, as I've been doing all day today. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think anybody can do it? Do you think Luka has a chance to catch up to LeBron James? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it is Wednesday, which means we have to do our NBA power rankings. That's coming up next for you, 30-1 here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over LeBron James hitting 50,000 career points. In this segment, we turn our attention to the rest of the NBA. The NBA Power Rankings coming up next here for you in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, March 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our NBA power rankings here in just a second. And starting off at number 30, it's the Washington Wizards once again. This is the closest the Wizards have been to not being number 30 in the NBA power rankings for a very long time, as the Charlotte Hornets have dropped 7 straight games. But the Washington Wizards, despite playing a little better and playing their opponents closer, still struggle to win games. They've got a big one against the Utah Jazz tonight, in which they're currently winning. But this is a bad team. This is a team that is fighting for the rights for Cooper Flag, and this is a team that will continue to be near the bottom of the power rankings and scratch and claw their way, attempting to get out of that number 30 spot. At number 29, it's those aforementioned Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets have lost 7 straight basketball games. This is a team that just has nothing left in the tank. This is a Charlotte Hornets team that it's just bad. They might end up getting that number 1 overall pick. Injuries have hurt them. They just have not been where we expected them to be after the start to the season that they had. At 28, it's those Utah Jazz, right? This is a team that doesn't have a lot going for it. Unlike the Wizards or the Hornets or a lot of these teams at the bottom, this is a team that doesn't have a lot of young, raw talent. This is a team that just is kind of stuck in no man's land. They're bad, but they don't really have the guys that are excusable to say, hey, we've got a future here. They can get a good draft pick this year in a pretty loaded draft class, actually. Maybe they can start to build towards something, but for now, as it stands, the Utah Jazz, just a little better than the worst in the NBA. At 29, it's the Toronto Raptors. I like this Raptors team a lot. It just hasn't really clicked this year as much as it did last season. This is a Raptors team that if they're able to turn it on with Brandon Ingram, they've got the pieces in Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett and all these guys to make a little bit of noise. They just need to get the right system in there, and I think this is a Raptors team that could make noise in the NBA play-in next season. At 26 is the Pelicans. They have been a different team ever since Zion Williamson came back. And it's not getting as much coverage or as much love as it should because Zion Williamson is amazing. He gets clowned on all the time for not living up to the outrageous expectations that we all put on Zion Williamson coming out of college. The next LeBron James, the next big thing, the next one that's going to be the face of the league. He struggled with injuries, he struggled with his weight, but he's come back healthier than ever in the best shape of his life, and he has come out dominant. If you remember the last time he was out there healthy in the playoffs, his first real playoff experience against the Lakers last season, before he got hurt, he was putting on a masterclass of a game. And in the 5 games that he's been back, this New Orleans Pelicans team has looked like the team that we all expected them to be more than the team that they have been all year long. So next year, if they're able to stay healthy, if they can reload, this is a Pelicans team that I really do think could be a really, really dangerous team in the West. At 25, it's the Nets. They have a couple guys that are ready to just explode for 50 points any given night. But that is not what you want when you're trying to tank, right? This is a team that very openly is trying not to be good. They traded away Dennis Schroeder this season because they were being too good. They traded for their own draft picks back because they expected to be bad this season. They've been a little better than they expected. They're going to be fighting for that lottery pick. They desperately need it, but this is a team that any given night could come out and play like a pretty good basketball team, but it's not. At 24, it's those Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid out for the rest of the season. Paul George is playing a little bit better, but still injuries hit this team hard. It's been a very disappointing year for the Sixers. They were expecting to go out with the addition of Paul George to compete for that Eastern Conference crown. Instead, they're down here with the basement feeders. It is absolutely not what they predicted was going to happen. It's a tough look over there in Philly right now. At 23, we have the Chicago Bulls. There's a little bit of hope in Chicago. They've got a lot of cap space. They've got a couple guys that have started to play better down the stretch, but this is still a Bulls team that is fighting for a lottery / maybe a 10 seed. It depends on the night. They come in and sometimes they look like they could compete with half the teams in the NBA, and other times they look like they're playing at a level where they shouldn't even be in the NBA. This is a Bulls team that's just not very good, much like a lot of these teams that we've covered at the bottom so far. At 22 is the Spurs. This is a Spurs team that has a lot of pieces. De'Aaron Fox is playing pretty solid. Chris Paul was playing pretty good this season. You've got a lot of young guys coming in and playing good basketball, but this season all kind of fell apart when Victor Wembanyama went down. This is a team that you can see the vision with. This is a team that when you look at what they've got going with the pieces, their young core, if they get one more solid piece, one more like stretch 4, stretch 3 kind of guy to come in and play with Wemby, this is a team that could be pretty dangerous in the Western Conference as long as Wemby comes back healthy next season. At 21, it's the Suns. Talk about disappointments. They brought in the new age big three, right? You have Bradley Beal, who just has not worked out, one of the worst contracts in the NBA right now. You have a massive contract with Kevin Durant, who's going to want out after this because they dangled his name in trade talks, and it just didn't work. And of course, Devin Booker, who's been the face of this team since he was drafted there. Kevin Durant is gone. This is a Phoenix Suns team that doesn't seem like it's even going to make the play-in, but with the Mavs seemingly dropping out, maybe they can find a way to that 10 seed. And number 20, it's the Orlando Magic. You talk about a team that's been hit by the injury bug. You can't talk about it without bringing up the Orlando Magic. This is an Orlando Magic team that I was incredibly high on this season. I started out in my preseason power rankings in the top 10. This is a Magic team that looked really good when healthy, and they were finally getting some momentum back. They still struggle shooting the three, but as soon as they start to get a little bit going, another major injury to one of their key stars. They've dealt with injuries to both of the Wagner brothers, to Banchero, to Suggs, to all of their key guys this season at different times, some of them even at the same time. If those guys can come back healthy and they can get a really dead-eye three-point shooter in the draft, this is a team that I think really could be a championship-level team in the East. At 19, it's the Blazers, another surprise team. This one, the first positive surprise team. They have sneakily been one of the best teams in the league. When we started our show, they were up on the Celtics. Now they're down big. But this is a team currently down by 20 to the Celtics in the third quarter. But they've won 15 of 21 games since the new year started. They've been the third best team by record in 2025. They're young guys, especially Deni Avdija has really brought in has been really a massive difference for them since coming over from Washington. A change of scenery has done wonders for him. This is a Blazers team that I think has the ability to make that 10 seed this year, especially with the Mavs dropping out. They're going to have to keep this pace up, but they're one of the teams that I think will find a way to sneak into the play-in and really give the young guys some good playoff experience, even if it's just for a game. At 18, we have the Hawks. This is a weird team. This is a team that feels like they should blow it up, but you have a good relationship with Trae Young. And when you have a star that doesn't want to leave, you don't want to get rid of that star, right? You've got a bunch of guys that if they're able to stay healthy, could work pretty well with Trae Young. You just don't have that big man piece, that piece that's going to tie it all together and push this Hawks team over the top. They were so close. They made an Eastern Conference Finals with him, but I just can't see them reaching the heights with the way that this team is set up right now, and I think it's time for the Hawks to move on. At 17, we have the Dallas Mavericks. You talk about a disaster season. Kyrie Irving, we talked about this yesterday, but Kyrie Irving gone for the year. Gone for most of next year as well. You've moved off of your major star in Luka Doncic. Anthony Davis and his team are talking about shutting it down for the year. This is a team that is just going to free fall right now, currently holding on to about a 3-game lead for the race for the 10 seed right now, but everything is about to go to shambles, and the Dallas Mavericks kind of brought this on themselves. They kind of shot themselves in the foot with this one. Everything that can go wrong is kind of going wrong for them right now, and it feels a little bit like karmic justice if I'm being honest with you. At 16, it's the Miami Heat. This is a Heat team that's dangerous. Tyler Hero, when he gets on, he's been playing amazing. A true all-star level guy. Bam Adebayo can turn it on soon, hopefully. You've got a lot of guys that, as always with the Heat, are stepping up out of nowhere. Shooters that just get hot. This is a very good Heat squad, and this is a Heat squad that's going to, once again, be a 8 to 6 seed and potentially cause some trouble for whoever is the number 1 in this year's Eastern Conference. In fact, giving the Cavaliers a little bit of trouble right now, tied at 71 halfway through the third. They've staged a bit of a comeback there, so they're a dangerous and feisty team as we go down the stretch. At 15, we have the Kings. A lot of moves that they have made have worked out, right? The Zach LaVine, ever since he's come over there, has been healthy and good. And when he's healthy, he is good. DeMar DeRozan has worked out pretty solid over there. Of course, you still have Sabonis, but moving off of Fox hasn't been as disastrous as a lot of people thought it would be. This is a Kings team that I think is pretty firmly locked into, at minimum, a top-seeded play-in spot. This is a Kings team that I don't know how far they're going to go in the playoffs. They smell like a first-round exit, but they do seem like a team that could take a game or two from whoever they play. At 14, we have the Timberwolves. Whenever you have Anthony Edwards, you've got a shot. But the thing is, this team just doesn't have too much outside of Anthony Edwards. They lost a lot of key pieces over the offseason. Injuries have bit them a couple times. This is a Timberwolves team that I do believe in, just not this year. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board, shed some contracts, and get back to a more acceptable roster spending size, and then they can go out and get a true number 2 star to pair with a massive star, a top 10 player in Anthony Edwards. The Clippers, theirs been fading a little bit, but Kawhi Leonard's back. He's playing good basketball. James Harden's still been playing great basketball. It sucks that you're losing Powell there for a little bit. He should be back soon, though. Bogdanovich has been a great addition at the trade deadline, and this is a Clippers team that's going to find their way in the playoffs this year. Again, another team that smells like a first-round exit, but one of those teams that I think maybe if they get the right matchup, if they're hot at the right time, could surprise a young 4 seed like the Rockets maybe. At 12, we've got the Pacers. They fall a little bit, but this is still a good Pacers team. They go as Tyrese Halliburton goes, right? And this team is just not consistent enough for me to love them. This is a team that when they're on, as we saw, they made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They gave the Boston Celtics the best fight that any other team gave them despite only winning 1 game. This is a Pacers team that has all the pieces to be really good. They just can't put it together on a nightly basis, which is going to hinder how good their team can be and how deep they can go in the playoffs. At 11, we have the Warriors. Ever since Jimmy Butler came in, took a little bit of the load off of Steph Curry. Steph Curry's been playing so much better. Now, I know Jimmy Butler hasn't yet exploded onto the scene, but playoff Jimmy's a real thing, and I think he's going to come in, play good minutes for them when they get to the playoffs, and they're a team that, again, I think could beat a good team, beat a team that they might be contenders in the West this year if you take them lightly enough. This is a dangerous Golden State Warriors team. Into the top 10, how about that? New kids on the block, the Detroit Pistons in the top 10 of the NBA power rankings. You just don't see that every day. A team that was the worst in the NBA last season, all the way up to a solidified playoff team with basically the same roster. They didn't change too much. They just changed the coach. They changed the culture. Cade Cunningham was already great, but now the rest of the world sees that. This is a team that is playing amazing basketball right now, and this is a team that I hope wins a playoff series or two. I just feel like they're a first-round exit. They're a little young. They don't have the experience there, but this is a fun team, and it's really cool to see how far they've turned it around in such a small amount of time. At number 9, we've got the Bucks. Giannis is playing at an MVP level. Damian Lillard is doing Damian Lillard things. This is a team that needs its Bobby Portis back. He'll be back from suspension near the end of the season. Kyle Kuzma's played solid defense. He's not really been great. I don't know what you expected out of Kyle Kuzma, though. But this is a Bucks team that I think, again, in the Eastern Conference could win a round or two. They to me smell like a second round exit in about 5 or 6 games. Rockets at 8. This is a big mystery to me. They're kind of losing their momentum right now. They're really good. They're really young, though. This is a team that I think could get upset in the playoffs. They're going to be hosting most likely a top 4 seed in the West, but this is a team that is just starting to lose what it had. It was at the number 2 seed for a long time in the West, but now the fuel is just running out on this young team. They'll be back. They'll be better. They know what it takes in the grind of a long NBA season. It's going to be really good for them, really good for this team to get some playoff experience this year, and I cannot wait to see how it goes. At number 7, we have the Grizzlies. This is a sleeper team. I love this Grizzlies team. They're going to be the 3rd best team in the West, right? They have a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense, which is kind of what you need in the NBA this to consider yourself a true contender. They kind of feel like the outside looking in, but they've got a lot of depth. They've got a lot of size. They've got a lot of skill. They've got the true star potential with Ja Morant. They've got a depoy level player in JJJ. This is a team that is just fun to watch. They play hard. They play fun. They play physical. They play good defense, great offense. This is a dangerous team. At 6, we have the Knicks. If they can shore up that defense a bit, they're a team that would catapult probably even to number 3. But their defense just isn't consistent enough. And again, I always have my concerns with the Tom Thibodeau teams. I'll bring it up week after week. Injuries have started to mount for this team, and we saw what happens in the playoffs when you run your stars out for 45 minutes a game. It can catch up to them. Now, these guys have done it for a while. I'm just a little worried about the future for this Knicks team. At 5, we've got the Nuggets. Whenever you have the best player in the world, you've got a shot, right? And this is a Nuggets team that continues to play great basketball. They're going to be a top team in the West. They're going to be a true contender in the West. I think they're the bottom of that true contenders list. Denver Nuggets are the number 5 contender in the NBA for me as far as winning a championship goes. And I think as long as you have Jokic, they're going to be a real tough out in the West. At 4, it's the Lakers. They continue to climb. LeBron continues to be a deadly duo. They go out there. They combine for 64 points last night. Their connection is amazing. Luka, being the ball-dominant guy, has worked out amazing, letting LeBron really take over on the defensive side of the floor, giving him more energy there. Jackson Hayes has truly benefited from getting Luka Doncic in the building. He, like every other center that he plays with, just feasts on the lobs that Luka gives him. He is amazing, or he has been playing amazing. He's a guy that is a little bit of a liability defensively, but he can make some highlight reel plays, and that's really all the Lakers needed. They can upgrade from him in the offseason, but for now, he's doing everything they need them to do. At number 3, it's the Boston Celtics. The Celtics, still a juggernaut. They've kind of fallen to the wayside because of the surprise of the Cavaliers and because the Thunder are playing as good as they are, but do not sleep on this Celtics team. Do not forget about them. They're the reigning NBA champions for a reason. They kept most of that team. In fact, I might even think they got better after last offseason. Jaylen Brown isn't quite playing to the same level, but Jason Tatum playing amazing basketball, and they'll turn it on in the playoff time, and it's going to be a real tough out. At number 2, the Oklahoma City Thunder fall 1 spot. I love what Shea's doing. He's going to win MVP. This is a team that is just dealing with a couple injuries right now, and they've struggled to stay 100% healthy. They've weathered the storm, though. They've still got 50 wins, 11 losses. They will be just fine, and they're the best team in the West by a country mile. And at number 1, that leaves the Cleveland Cavaliers. They go out there, come back from 23 points down against the Celtics. That is crazy. Donovan Mitchell turns on like an offensive engine when you need him to. Darius Garland plays great ball. You've got the big guys on the inside. Evan Mobley really having a great season. Coach of the year for the Cavaliers right now. This is a great Cavs team. They're going to dominate the Eastern Conference. This has been a really fun year, and I cannot wait for the playoffs. But let me know what you think. Top 10, once again, for you. Pistons, Bucks at 9, Rockets at 8, Grizzlies at 7, Knicks at 6, Nuggets at 5, Lakers at 4, Celtics at 3, Thunder at 2, and the Cavaliers at 1. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to our continuing series. Today, we talk about what the perfect offseason might be for the Detroit Lions as we finish up the NFC side and head over to the AFC tomorrow. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, March 5th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the NBA Power Rankings. In this segment, we turn our attention over to the NFL. What would a dream offseason look like for the Detroit Lions, a team that went 14-3, won their division, but fell in the divisional round? We'll talk about that in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, March 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into what a perfect offseason might look like for the Detroit Lions. Of course, this is a Lions team that had the tied for the best record in the NFL last season. Went 14-3, won the NFC North. Of course, losing in a great game to the Washington Commanders after turning the ball over 5 times in that one. You can't win a game like that. This is a team that was decimated by injuries. They lost a whole defensive roster worth of guys to injuries, and yet they were still able to win 14 games, stay competitive in the playoffs. It just ran into a tough matchup with the high-powered Commanders offense and a great quarterback in Jaden Daniels. In terms of cap space this season goes, they've got $51 million. It's pretty good. 12th in the NFL right now, but they do have a lot of key pending free agents. They've got a couple starters, a couple guys that have been pretty big in the locker room, and guys that would be good to re-sign, right? You've obviously got one of the top corners on the market in Carlton Davis, as well as 2 other corners that got some playing time to fill in Kindle Vildor and Aficionado Melanfanu. These guys all got good playing time. I think if you do need a corner, you need to bring back Carlton Davis, a guy familiar with the system, a guy that had a pretty good year last year. If not, go out and get one in the draft. I still think Carlton Davis is someone you should bring back anyway, though, as long as it's for the right price. You need to have someone opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, though. Aiden Hutchinson goes down. So did Marcus Davenport, who's a free agent right now. Marcus Davenport came in and had a really explosive start to the season before ending his season with an injury. He's someone that I think would be really good to bring back. He's someone that was really quick, really great at getting pressure out on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. And if you're able to bring him back and pair him back up with Aiden Hutchinson, that would be an immediate improvement on that defense, as well as on the offensive line. The bread and butter of this team, there's two guys that I think would be pretty good. You have sixth man of the year, Dan Skipper. Guy that is huge on their trick plays, just a guy that's just important to bring back for the locker room. And right guard Kevin Zeitler, starting right guard, someone that's very important to bring in. Another key one that I think is that I think would be interesting to see them bring back is Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick served as wide receiver 3 for this team. He came on at near the end and played a couple of big-time games, caught a couple touchdowns down the stretch for them. Tim Patrick, a really good NFL story, and I still think he's got a lot in the tank. He's not going to be someone that's too expensive, and in a wide receiver market where a lot of those big fish are going to go for a lot of money, bringing in a solid wide receiver like Tim Patrick would be really good for this team, especially if they want to save some of their money to go out and get some free agents. But in that free agency, there are a couple positions that they do need to get, right? Edge rusher is the number one. They need to go out and get someone that can go opposite, so they at least at a minimum have depth to go across from Aiden Hutchinson, right? Marcus Davenport would be a great first step. Also a guy like Hassan Reddick, who I think would be amazing. A top 5 in sacks over the last 5 years, has been someone that when he's healthy, when he's playing, has been an absolute menace for quarterbacks. He's someone that I think they would love to bring in. The quarterback market would be great. You need to bring back Carlton Davis. I think he's cornerback 1 or 2 on the market right now. If there's another corner you like, go out and get him. Otherwise, the draft is a good place to get some corners in the late first round. There's going to be a couple available. Wide receivers. You have Jamison Williams. He's a nice field stretcher. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is an amazing wide receiver in the league. I don't think you'd need to go out and get a big name receiver, but if you can get a guy like Chris Godwin for cheap, maybe Christian Kirk wants to go to a winner, he's someone that could come up and you get a guy that can play outside, inside, just do everything this team needs. But when it comes to the draft, right, this is where they're going to have their most important decision, right? They lose, obviously, both of their coordinators, which sucks. And that they had a really good coaching staff with Dan Campbell, but we're looking at a couple different spaces for them at pick number 28. You can either go with an edge rusher. So if you opt not to re-sign Marcus Davenport, or if it's too much, go and get an edge rusher or a linebacker, someone like a Jalen Walker out of Georgia. He's someone that played linebacker, but also was really good at rushing the passer, someone that might be better as an edge rusher. I think Jalen Walker is the guy that they should focus on. He's the one that I had mocked to them at pick 28 in our latest mock draft that we did the other day. But if he's off the board there, his teammate at Georgia, Mykel Williams, when it comes to rushing the passer, is someone that might be available in the late first. He's been climbing up draft boards. If he somehow falls to 28, it would be a mistake not to grab him. I doubt he'll be there, but it should be a target for them if he's there. We also talked about corners. A lot of the top corners are going to be gone. The top 2, Will Johnson out of Michigan and Jahdae Barron out of Texas, I both expect to be gone. But someone that I really do like is Siobhan Revell. Siobhan Revell out of ECU, Eastern Carolina University, is a guy that I really do love. He dealt with some injuries last season, but he should be back. He's one of my favorite corners in this draft. He's someone that you should be able to find at the end of the first round. If you aren't able to get a corner opposite of Carlton Davis, or if Carlton Davis walks in free agency, this is where you go out and you get Siobhan Revell. Revell, again, one of my favorite corners in this class, and he should be available late in that first round. Go out and get him. If not, wide receiver is always a good option. There's a chance you could get one of the 2 through 4 wide receivers, the top receivers outside of Ted McMillan. Maybe Emeka Egbuka falls that far. That would be a godsend if he did. Maybe Luther Burden falls that far. Maybe Matthew Golden falls that far. I don't think any of them will, but if they do, grab them up at 28. Grab another offensive lineman. It never hurts in case some more injuries happen. If Kevin Zeitler decides not to return, you can bring in a guy like Tyler Booker out of Alabama as an inside guy. He's someone that I think could do a lot for them. There's a lot of ways to go. But overall, I think the perfect offseason, the one that would help them get to the Super Bowl, is re-sign their guys, right? Re-sign Carlson Davis, re-sign Marcus Davenport, re-sign Kevin Zeitler, re-sign Dan Skipper, bring back all the guys that are free agents that are important to this team because they had a really good culture, and that is important. Then, in the draft, go out and get a guy like Jalen Walker would be my number one pick. In free agency, get more depth at the defense. You can't count on injuries, of course, but you don't want to be left high and dry like they were. They didn't have a lot of depth at that edge position. Get a guy that can come in and fill depth and maybe get a wide receiver 3 as well. And then just stay healthy, right? At the end of the day, the key for this Lions team more than anything, the reason they didn't make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl was because they weren't healthy. This is a team that had everything they needed to compete with the Eagles, to compete with the Chiefs. They won 14 to 17 games. They were incredible in the regular season. Jared Goff is a guy that, if he has the offensive line like the Lions do, can be incredibly effective, can be incredibly smart with the football. They just need to be smart. They need to be healthy, and that is really what's going to push them over the edge when it comes to the NFL season next year. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the perfect offseason for the Detroit Lions? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to baseball. We move over to the AL Central today, and we take a look at the team that was the worst in MLB history, the Chicago White Sox. We'll talk about what they need to do to improve on their season, if they can even get worse from last year, what they did this offseason, and what their season outlook looks like right now. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over what the perfect offseason might look like for the Detroit Lions. In this segment, we turn our attention to baseball. With the baseball season just about 3 weeks away from opening day, we talk about what the season might look like for the Chicago White Sox. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, March 5th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox are coming off of the worst season in the history of Major League Baseball. They went 41 and 121, obviously last in the AL Central, and of course, they missed the playoffs. Again, I cannot stress to you guys enough, they had the worst record in the history of baseball, and there's a case that they got worse this offseason. Let's see first who they lost before we look at who they added. They lost their top starting pitcher, Garrett Crochet. Garrett Crochet is a guy that they were able to get a lot back for in a trade with the Red Sox, but none of it was going to help now. They got Weichelman Gonzalez, Kyle Teal, Chase Meardroth, and Braden Montgomery. All of these guys are not expected to be up on the opening day roster. A couple of them aren't even going to be up on the 40-man roster. They also made a couple of minor trades. They moved off of Aaron Combs for Tyler Gilbert and Yokir Fajardo for Cam Boozer. But really, the big losses came in free agency, right? They lose Mike Soroka, who came over to the Nationals. They lose Chris Flexen. They lose Yohan Moncada. They lose Aniel De Los Santos. They lose Gavin Sheets and Nicky Lopez, as well as the guys that they traded away at the trade deadline, like an Eric Fetty, who had a pretty good season for them last year. They lose a lot of guys that were top of their class, right? And now we look at what they brought back, right? This is not a team that was flushed with talent, but they still lost a lot of their top guys. You look at who they brought in. They bring in Joey Gallo on a minor league deal, who had a disaster season last year with the Washington Nationals. He's a guy that can, if he touches the ball, it goes about 700 feet. He also misses the ball way too often. He's a guy that can play gold glove level defense if you give him the right spot, but he's not a guy that you want to be in your everyday lineup as someone you're depending on. Michael A. Taylor on a 1-year, $1.95 million deal is someone that I really do like, but he's, again, not a guy that you want to be your everyday outfielder. Brandon Drury on a minor league deal is someone that can come in and hit a couple of bats as a bench bat. A really interesting one that they brought in was James Karinchak. He was off last season, but he used to be an elite closer in baseball. He was dealing with injuries. He's on a minor league deal. That is someone that I really do love that pickup. Maybe that can make a difference for them. They also bring in starting pitcher Martin Perez on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Bobby Dahlback to just be a utility guy. Josh Rojas to be their starting second baseman on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Another starting pitcher to be in the rotation, and Bryce Wilson, 1 year, $1.05 mil. Mike Tauchman to be their leadoff hitter at 1 year, $1.95, and Austin Slater, who's dealing with some injuries right now, but will be on the 40-man, a 1 year, $1.75 million deal. None of these guys really stick out to you as someone that's going to make a big difference, right? And then we look at their lineup right now, right? They have Mike Tauchman, who we talked about leading off in right field. Luis Robert Jr., who could have a breakout season, but him on his own, not going to be enough. You've got Andrew Vaughn at first base. That is not what you want hitting third. Josh Rojas or Brandon Drury at second, depending on the lefty or righty. Lennon Sosa at DH, one of their guys that could come up and maybe make a bit of noise. Joey Gallo or Michael A. Taylor in left field. Miguel Vargas playing third. You've got Colston Montgomery, a guy coming up from the minor leagues who, if he's able to show why he was a top 100 prospect, maybe he can be something. And at catcher, Corey Lee. You also have a couple injuries. We talked about Austin Slater. Andrew Benintendi is dealing with injuries, but neither of those guys, again, really move the needle. And then we look at the rotation, right? This lineup, not very good. It's going to rely on a couple young guys hitting their stride in their rookie seasons. Colston Montgomery, Corey Lee. We're talking about Joey Gallo with a resurgent season. Miguel Vargas with a resurgent season. Lennon Sosa needs to step up. A lot of these guys, they're just big question marks, and you can't really rely on. But in the rotation, it's just not much better. Martin Perez, who they picked up for $5 million, is going to be their number one starter, and he's not someone you want to be up there. The rest of it, as you can imagine, not very good. Jonathan Cannon, number 2, Davis Martin, Sean Burke, and Bryce Wilson. That is an ugly rotation. Again, this is a team that won 41 games last year, and while they weren't sitting on their hands and doing nothing, they didn't do enough for me to be totally convinced that they're going to be completely better, right? Injuries, Kai Bush and Jesse Schlottens, they're not going to come in and make a big difference. The bullpen with Justin Anderson as your closer is just a mess. The rest of those guys, Frazier Ellard, Gus Varland, Cam Boozer, Jordan Leisure, Tyler Gilbert, Penn Murphy, and Shane Smith, none of these guys are going to make a big difference. There's not even trade bait that you can get at the deadline, really, with a lot of these guys. At least last year, they had a guy like Garrett Crochet or an Eric Fetty that really stepped up that they were able to get some stuff for. This line for their over-under is set at 53.5. That is saying they're going to win 12 to 13 more games than they won last year. And I just can't see that with this roster. I think the under is absolutely going to happen. Do I think that it is for sure going to be worse than 41 games? That's going to be the question. We are once again on worst team in baseball history watch. This is a team that could compete with the pre-MLB era guys. This is a team that could lose 130 games this year, and would not be shocked. But I can't sit here and say with full confidence that this is a team that will be the worst team in baseball back-to-back years, the worst team in MLB history in back-to-back years. I think they'll win at least 41 games. I have them sitting anywhere from 40 to 46 this year. I'm putting them on the upside there, 46 and 116, but that is still going to be awful. That is still going to be a team that you don't want to be a part of. This is a team that's going to be eating salary at the trade deadline. And again, the big issue, they don't really have a guy that I'm looking at other than Luis Robert, that I think is going to fetch too much at the deadline. And even Robert isn't a guarantee to fetch too much at the deadline. He's a guy that's been up and down throughout his career, and he could have a breakout season again, or a resurgent season, I should say. But that doesn't mean they're going to get too much out of the rest of this lineup. And I can't with good faith look at this and say they're going to be much better. They're a lock for the bottom of the AL Central. Everyone else really has a shot at that division, not the White Sox. If they do anything that looks like competing, I will be shocked. I have them losing 116 games this year, being the worst team in baseball, competing with themselves for a record they set last year, and I think there's a good chance they could break it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the White Sox do it again? And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow going over everything from around the world of sports. We turn over to the AFC in our perfect offseason for the NFL, as well as everything else that breaks tonight. The NFL's been going wild. I'll see you then. You all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.